Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask Better Questions, the podcast where we delve into the nuances of leadership and personal development. I'm your host, Peter, and today we're going to explore values. So what are they, and why are they so incredibly important? Well, for those of you who are new here, I'm Peter Adams. I have over 20 years' experience in leadership and consulting. I'm a published author and speaker in the leadership space, and my mission here is to help excellent leaders become exceptional leaders through a better mindset. But before we start today's episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Colour4 Solutions. Colour4 Solutions offers leadership training for people who have reached a ceiling in their leadership journey and want to achieve more without dedicating substantial time and effort. So today's episode is all about values. It's not going to be an incredibly long episode, but it is so important. Values and goals are what guide organizations. As they say, destination determines direction. So goals are set, and that determines which direction an organization is headed. Values determine how you get there. And values are so incredibly important, not just on the journey, but inspiring people to come along on the journey. And today we're going to delve into that further. Now, today's episode stems from a discussion that David and I were having. We were discussing how decisions get made in organizations and how we've worked for a number of organizations, and every single one has had values. And some of the organizations David and I have both worked at, and we couldn't tell you what the values were. Others are basically tattooed on the inside of the eyelids of anyone who has ever worked at these companies. We could rattle them off, and we could point to numerous examples of where decisions were made or changed because somebody brought up the values of the organization. And that is incredibly important. I remember working for a UK-based outsourcing company, and their values I walked past every day on my way into the office. I had them on a small placard in the reception area of the office. And so when you walked in past that to the offices, you would be able to read them. And I looked at them every day, and I realized that these are the sorts of values that meant nothing, absolutely nothing to the organization, to anyone working there. They would just as easily be found hanging up on the outside of Auschwitz or some equally horrid concentration camp. It didn't matter what the values were, because the values didn't prevent any particular behavior or entice any particular behavior. They were there to make up the numbers and to make it seem like this was an organization that had priorities. It didn't. The organization was basically completely dollar-driven, completely ego-driven, and it was terrible to work there. It was awful, and most people that worked there would say it was awful, if they were being honest. And that said, Dave and I also pointed to another company that we worked for, an Australian-based company that had set its values very early on and had grown very rapidly, very quickly, and put a lot of people on, and yet still managed to have a fantastic culture, a really, really great culture. It had fun as a value. It had ambition as a value. But it didn't have these words as just words. These were lived experiences from the people. When you started at each company, it was a very different experience. Yes, they would talk about the values, but the way in which they talked about the values was so incredibly different. The one particular company, the first one, the outsourcing company, it was, oh yeah, these are our values. Great, wonderful, let's move on. Next thing, tick that box. We've discussed the values. The other company would say, these are our values, and we live by these things. Like, if you've got a problem with these, tell us now, because you won't want to work here if you don't agree with these. And they would cite specific examples, and each person would be different. They'd say, oh, remember when we did this? Yeah, somebody such and such mentioned in the meeting with executives in there saying, hey, that doesn't seem entirely consistent with this value or that value. And the decisions were changed based on that feedback from employees. Like, suddenly decisions were overturned, and it didn't matter who'd made them or whatever else. The actual decision was changed because, that's not consistent with that value. And behaviors were coached in terms of the values. And it's not just, this is a behavior we need to avoid because XYZ value. This is a behavior we need to encourage because of XYZ value. And when new companies and new employees came to the company, because this particular company went public, and so consequently the executive team was very much overworked, but the company was growing. So new executives came in, middle management and the like were slotted in. They were told, these are our values and you must adhere to them. And they'd come from companies similar to the first company, where values were something that was written on a napkin and put in a drawer somewhere. Or there was a lovely book that was given to you that no one ever read, or something like that, all about the values. Well, these values were actually lived, and the people who were with the company in existence would come to these new executives and say, that's not consistent with our values. And the new executives, the new middle management would say, we don't care, because that's not how we do business. We do business by we say, you do, and that's not leadership. If you want to motivate people and live a culture, you need to be very clear what your values are. So David and I were thinking we should definitely put a podcast out in relation to values and how important they are. Because it's all well and good to have goals, and goals are, you want to be the best company in your industry. Fantastic. Or it can be even more. It can be a SMART goal, a specific, measurable, achievable, and timely goal, saying by the end of the year, we're going to be within the top three of all providers in the space in which we're in. And that's great. That's specific, measurable, achievable, and timely. Wonderful. But that is just a goal. And I worked at, say, an internet supply company, an ISP. We want to be the number one ISP. That's not a compelling goal to anyone who's working there, unless there are some values as to how we're going to become that. Values sell the goals. The values tell a person what the journey to achieve this goal is going to look like. And that fills out the picture and paints a much more compelling story. And that's what values need to be used for. They need to explain to people, it's not just that we're going to achieve the goal, but how we're going to achieve the goal. And that was something that one of these particular companies, the second one, didn't live up to. A lot of people have just gone, well, we've got to leave the company because the values no longer matter. And that was incredibly disappointing. I don't think that was the intention, but certainly some of the people that were hired don't live those values, and it has taken so much away from what the organization was trying to achieve because middle management came in and don't live the values. Now, the executive team, they haven't changed significantly, and they all live the values, absolutely. And the bottom line troops at the coalface, they all live the values. And the people coming on board were indoctrinated into the values. The middle management managed to hear all the values, managed to nod and smile through the interviews, and managed to get hired, but they don't live the values. And this is something, if you're at an executive level or a middle management level, and you know you're setting goals for your employees, your teams, your managers, or your staff, and you're trying to get buy-in on that, you first need to go to first principles and get your values right. What sort of company do you want to be? If you want to be the biggest in your industry, people could quit your organization and go and work for the number one company. Goal achieved. That's not the goal that people are signing up for. They're signing up for an organization that's going to be a success, and that is achieving goals. Wonderful. But it's not the achievement of the goal that matters. It's how you achieve that goal that matters. You want to be part of an organization that has fun, that does it in such a way. You can have a value that you're going to be ecologically sustainable. And for some people, that will be a compelling value. For others, it's you want to give back to the community. For some, it's you want to provide value for customers. And some people, that will be a compelling value. A lot of the time, I've found that in a team environment, having fun is a compelling value. If you want to have fun at work, and who doesn't? Like, in all honesty, it's all well and good to be a stiff suit, but there are times that you can be irreverent. There are times when you can't, for sure, absolutely. But there are times when you can be irreverent and you can speak entirely in meme. And Lord knows I've had some fantastic fun at organizations where we've had meme competitions. And it has been exceptional. It's been fun. It's been great. But there is a time for these things. And a value of having fun at work, as well as being challenged to grow, those are things that are compelling to an employee. I've found that a lot of people take jobs for what they're going to learn in the job. And the only thing that you can really learn at a job is something that makes you grow, that stretches you, that challenges you. And that's when you do your best learning. So it's incredibly important to have a value that stipulates that you are going to grow in this role. And we are going to push you to the absolute extremities of your comfort zone, but we're not going to break you, and we will support you. And support is a value. And as much as the first company that had their values up on the wall that meant nothing, they had a value there from one of the managers and one of the leaders there that was all based on support. And that was brilliance. Unfortunately, they didn't follow through on that value. They talked about it incessantly. They pushed the value and they said, this is one of our values that we want you to feel supported. However, when it came to actually providing the support, there wasn't any. So that was very frustrating and disappointing. I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that employees resonate with values. They feel connected. There's a deeper sense of purpose and belonging when you're in an organization that has expressed values. And setting values, hence, is setting values correctly, I think I'm trying to say here, is paramount for fostering a culture that cultivates employee engagement and organizational success. So values should be authentic. They should be set by the team. They should be set by all levels of the organization in terms of everyone should have an equal say in what the values are. And if you have a team that you need to come together, they need to come together on the values. They need to understand exactly and be clear what the values are. You need to identify the mission and the vision, but the values are set independent from the goals and the vision of the organization. They're not aspirational statements. They should be embodying lived experience. I've seen some fantastic values, but I've seen some terrible values equally, and hence the examples that I've given at the start of this. Another thing I'd like to mention here and reiterate is that you need to involve everyone in the organization in the process of defining and refining values. That can enhance your buy-in and the ownership of them, fostering a sense of collective identity and a shared purpose. That is incredibly important because values that come down from above that mean nothing to everyone in the organization, as in the first case in point, that means values are useless and you don't have the ability, there's no redeeming features with these values. If you have compelling and great values, but nobody is buying them, nobody has any invested identity or shared purpose in the values that you have, then you need new values. I was much earlier on in my career, I was told that values are incredibly important in setting culture, and I ignored it. I didn't think culture was that big a thing. Having worked for a number of companies now, and having worked in both good and bad organizations, largely with the same people, just with different values and different cultures, I understand now that culture is incredibly important, but it's not set by a HR team. It's not set from above. It's set by the values, which should be set throughout the entire organization by employees, not just an executive team that say, here are your values, go live them. The other point that I want to mention here is it's essential to differentiate between values and goals. Organizations have both, right? And whilst values represent enduring principles and beliefs, goals are specific. They are a target and they're measurable. Once you achieve a desired outcome, you've got your goal, right? Their values are something that is longer term. There's no achieving a value. There's this will get us a step closer, or this embodies this value. It's not something that is achieved. It's not something that we've achieved that value, we can tick it off. It's an ongoing struggle to remain relevant to the organization. So values provide the moral compass and the guiding principles that inform goal setting and decision-making processes. They shape the organization's culture and serve as the foundation upon which goals are established and pursued. Goals, on the other hand, they provide a direction. So they are very much, we are trying to get here. In order to get here, we need to do A, B, and C. So that's our, the short-term goals, the long-term goal. You can see this is the direction we need to head. Those things are all goal-related. They provide focus, accountability, and help translate values into tangible actions and results. So we need to be trying to achieve this, and we need to be doing these things in order to be true to our values and achieve our goals. So both values and goals are an integral component to organizational success. Values provide the why behind the what. So if goals are the what, and in fact some of the why, the how and the why is values. So you're trying to be the best customer service or customer focused organization. Customer focus is sometimes, as one of the values that I've had instilled into me at one of the companies I worked for, was being good to people. And being good to people sounds wonderful, sounds fluffy, but when you have a specific case in front of you, it's very clear to go, right, is this result being good to people? Is this action going to be good to people? And who are people? Well, people are both the customer and the employees. It's not about the organization. It's about being good to people. So suddenly people are human beings. So is this a good outcome for the persons involved, both the customer, the employee? Sometimes you might get other people involved who are not customers. So this person used to be a customer with us. They've moved on, but the new person who's bought that location or whatever else now has a problem due to what our organization has done for the last customer at that location. They are not our customer, but they are a person who's impacted by this particular situation. Are we going to be good to them? And most organizations go, well, it's not our problem. It's not our problem. They're not our customer. We don't care. Well, if you want to be good to people, what would a company that's good to people do? Because we may not look after this person, but we could. And if we did, is it the sort of thing that's going to get us a better reputation? Absolutely. Is that person going to tell people, hey, I'm not even a customer of these guys, and these guys went over and above and solved this problem that wasn't theirs to solve? That's why my company was so popular amongst the industry. That's why this particular company was so well versed at being good to people, because it was good for the organization. It was good for the people involved, and it was great in terms of word of mouth amongst actual human beings who do that. Now, this is where I'd normally have some sort of a discussion as to how to align your values with your goals, and it's esoterical and kind of a bit of a wank, okay? So I am going to just dispense with all that and instead read to you two sets of values from two different companies, okay? One of which was a company that I thought was terrible. And you'll see that when I read out the values. One of which was a company I thought was brilliant. And you'll see that. when I read out the values. Now, see if you can pick which is which. So this company has 5 values. They have think big, no bullshit, be good to people, don't be ordinary, be awesome, and have fun. And the other company had the values, only 4 of them: trust, care, innovation, and pride. Now, I think you can probably tell which one is which just by the fact that the 5 values I read out first are actively things that you can, in the words that are used, apply to a situation. Thinking big. And they have a blurb here that says, if somebody tells us something can't be done, that's when we do our best work. We specialize in the impossible. We do things differently and we question the status quo. Just because something has always been done that way, does it have to stay like that? So, no bullshit. We don't bullshit our customers. We tell them straight. Even though it may be news that they don't want to hear or we don't want to tell them, we don't sell them things that they don't need, and we take ownership when we are in the wrong. We are human, and it's all right to make mistakes if we clear them up and don't repeat them. These are radical values when you consider the other company just has the words trust, care, innovation, and pride. One of those is the 7th deadly sin. So I'm just looking at pride going, why am I proud of the work? What does care mean? Who am I trusting? Do I trust my customer, or do I trust my manager, or am I supposed to trust the process? What is innovation? Like, innovation can be a number of things, but the first company there with thinking big, that tells me we question the status quo, and we don't just do things because that's how the way we've always done them. Doesn't have to stay like that. That's in the thinking big. That is in the blurb. That is innovation. Innovation as a value is lame. Having fun. We love a joke. We banter and we're playful with our customers where appropriate. Belly laughs happen a lot. We think that if you're not having fun, you're in the wrong job or with the wrong company. Being good to people. Above all, this company is a family for both staff and customers. Family is important. Whether you have just joined or whether you've been here from the start, we treat each other with respect and we are good to people because it is the right thing to do, not because it's a selling point. I have another friend who runs a business, and he says one of his values is doing the right thing is always the right thing to do. And that sounds corny, and it sounds, well, corny, but to repeat myself. But doing the right thing is the right thing to do. And some people need to be reminded that doing the right thing in business is the right thing. And so having a value that says doing the right thing is always the right thing to do does clear things up when it comes to giving a customer a refund. Give them the refund because it's the right thing to do. Tell them what you're doing because it's the right thing to do. Doing the right thing is always the right thing to do. But sometimes people stop and think, oh, hang on, this could get us into trouble. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes it can open up legal loopholes and whatever else. But it's, if you come at it with the this is the right thing to do aspect, and you have a reasonable background in business, and you approach the customer in good faith, saying this is the right thing to do, more often than not, you will survive these things because you're doing the right thing. And that is the reason that you are acting the way you are. You don't get sued because of what you do to make things right. You generally get sued because of the situation you find yourself in because things weren't right. So one of the things I am trying to get across in this particular discussion is that values are incredibly important. They need to be active and they need to be applied to the behaviors in an organization in order to have a cultural impact. If you are simply saying, hey, look, We've got trust, care, innovation, and pride on a little stamp on the way in, and you've got it on your post-it notes. That's great. That is not something that is a lived experience. It's not something that is going to get you fans and people that are so happy and proud to work at your organization. Not to say that people cannot be happy and proud to work at an organization with those values, but that is a separate discussion. You can be proud of the work that you're doing because you're doing some fantastic work in, say, the healthcare space. You can trust your senior management. You can trust your processes, but it's not because it's a value. It's because you've done it for 6 years now and you know that this process is pretty good. But innovation-wise, are you going to trust the process or are you going to try and innovate it? You know, if you can start seeing that there is a problem here and anyone that fails a quality assessment, well, you didn't take due care, therefore you're breaching our values. And suddenly you're using your values as a bludgeon against your employees to say, you must do everything incredibly well all the time and there is no room for error. Well, that's entirely in line with your values, but it's entirely terrible and it will make the place a terrible place to work at. But it's entirely in line with your values. So suddenly you see that this culture could be both really good or really bad, depending on how these values are applied. When you come at a culturally building set of values, doing the right thing is always the right thing to do. It's very different, and it's very difficult to bludgeon your employees with that particular value. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have conflicting values and that you can't have a terrible place to work at because of that. But that said, typically what I've found is companies that have good values and live them, you don't have to have 500 values, but equally having a small number of values, but them being largely meaningless is kind of pointless and worthless and pathetic. You want to have very good values that your organization already embodies. You don't want to be trying to recreate your culture through your values. Find out what your values are. And if you're not happy with them, change them so that your employees go, yeah, we want to be a fun place to work. Great. We're going to make fun a value. But actually live that. Don't just put fun as, hey, our 5 values are now trust, care, innovation, pride, and fun. Because you're not going to be able to have fun at a company that bludgeons you with the other values. Pride and fun aren't very closely correlated. You can be proud, but fun doesn't really stem from pride. Fun doesn't necessarily stem from care. So you want to make sure that everything meshes well together. And I can tell you now that I can almost guarantee that this company here with trust, care, innovation, and pride didn't ask their employees. And if they did, they focus grouped it. It's not something that has come out of an organic conversation with human beings. Whereas I can tell you now, don't be ordinary, be awesome, and no bullshit are definitely values that came out of actual people's mouths. And yes, the value that this company has is no bullshit, and that is written out in all of the literature. It's not a secret. You can probably figure out which companies these values come from. That said, I think we will start wrapping this up here. If you enjoyed today's episode, like and subscribe, but more importantly, share it with somebody who you feel needs to hear this. I'll be back next week with more. Until then, keep asking better questions. And remember, leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. Take care, and we'll see you back here next week.